Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 5th January 2018. Now, let us begin. Now, we begin by first analyzing the news from page 1 about the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. Now, let us understand this case from an international relations perspective. Now, India has asked for access to Kulbhushan Jadhav under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations 1963. Now, the Vienna Convention is an international treaty, and India and Pakistan are members of this treaty. Now, moving on to the second point. Now, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations allows a country consular access, and here by consular access, we mean access to the diplomats that are stationed in that country in the High Commission or the embassy. It also allows free communication, legal representation to their nationals who are either arrested or detained in other countries. Now, it means that India or the Indian High Commission in Pakistan should have free access to Kulbhushan Jadhav and be allowed to provide legal representation to him also. But Pakistan has refused India this provision. Now, let us understand in the third point as to why it has been refused. Now, the Vienna Convention is vague on access to individuals who have been accused of espionage, meaning of being a spy, or of terrorism. Now, Pakistan has accused Kulbhushan Jadhav of being a spy and being involved in terrorist activities in Pakistan. Now, because of this accusation, Pakistan in April 2017 sentenced Kulbhushan Jadhav to the death penalty. Now, moving on to the Indian response to this. Now, after this, India approached the International Court of Justice that Pakistan is in violation of the Vienna Convention and other international norms. Now, during this case, the International Court of Justice stayed the execution of Kulbhushan Jadhav. Now, after this, the news is currently in transition, and we have to wait for the verdict of the International Court of Justice and how the diplomatic relations between India and Pakistan work upon the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. Now, hopefully, up till here, you have understood about the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, as to how this Vienna Convention applies to the Kulbhushan Jadhav case, as to why Pakistan is not allowing India access to Kulbhushan Jadhav, and what has been the verdict of the International Court of Justice. Now, to further understand about the International Court of Justice, you can refer to the December edition of the Focus magazine. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken the first article from page 1 and the second article from page 8. Now this article focuses on the critique of the Triple Talaq bill, and as you may know, in the DNS of 29th December 2017, we had covered the features of the Triple Talaq bill. While in today's DNS, we would cover the critique of the Triple Talaq bill. Now moving forward, now we would be analyzing the critique of the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Bill 2017, or which is more popularly known as the Triple Talaq bill. Now the first point is the bill declares Triple Talaq, or which is known as Talaq-e-Biddat, as null and void. Now this point has been criticized because the Supreme Court in its own observation has declared the Talaq-e-Biddat as null and void. So this bill is again repeating a point which has already been established by the Supreme Court. Now the second point is that the bill makes Triple Talaq a criminal offence. And moreover, the offence is non-cognizable and non-bailable. Now this point has been criticized first by asserting that this was not part of the Supreme Court judgment. It means that there was no reference in the Supreme Court judgment on making Triple Talaq a criminal offence. The second critique is that this offence can be registered by anyone. Now it means that it is not only the wife that can register a complaint against Triple Talaq, and anyone can complain against a Muslim husband with regards to this offence. And the third critique to this point is that there is no reconciliation procedure. By making Triple Talaq a criminal offence, there is a reduction in the mediation process that can be formed between the husband and the wife. Now another feature of this bill has been of children custody and of substance allowance. Now the first critique to this feature has been that if the husband is in the jail, then he will not be able to provide a substance allowance to the wife. And the second critique to this feature has been that if Triple Talaq is null and void and no divorce proceedings have begun, then the husband and wife are technically still married. And if they're technically still married, then the question of children custody does not arise. Now, hopefully, up till here, you have understood the three features of this bill and you understand the specific criticism of each feature. Now, with this video and of the earlier video, you would be able to have a comprehensive grasp on the Triple Talaq bill. And now we move on to our next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 7. Now, this article talks about the Women at Workplace Act, and let us analyze it further. Now, we would be analyzing the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition, and Redressal Bill. Now, the first feature of this bill is that it replaced the Supreme Court guidelines that the Supreme Court had given in the Vishaka case judgment. The second feature is that this bill provides a definition of sexual harassment at the workplace. Now, the third feature is that the bill allows for the formation of an internal complaints committee. Now, this internal complaints committee would be formed at the workplace. The fourth feature is that it allows for the formation of a local complaints committee. And this local complaints committee would be formed at the district level or at the block level. Now, hopefully, up till here, you have understood the source for this bill and what are its two main features. Now, the question is, why is this in the news? Now, there have been reports and criticism that there has been a lack of implementation and enforcement of this law. Now, the Supreme Court has asked the central and the state government to reply with regards to this problem. Now, the lack of implementation is that the district officers and the local complaints committee have not been appointed. And similarly, there have been no reporting and compliance reports from workplace. Now, hopefully, up till here, you have understood as to why this bill is in the news. Apart from this, you should understand one more feature. Now, this bill covers women in workplace irrespective of the fact whether they're employed or not. So, even a visitor woman at a workplace is covered under this bill. Moreover, domestic workers are exempted from this bill. So, domestic workers who are women who work in someone's home would not be covered under this bill. Now, this bill is very important from your UPSC perspective and can be asked in your prelims examination in terms of its features, and moreover, it can be asked in your mains examination in the governance section and in the social issues section. Now we move on to our next article. Now there are two articles on the Bhima Koregaon problems on page 8 and on page 11. Now the conflict in Bhima Koregaon has been covered in yesterday's DNS from the social and from the historical perspective, and therefore we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 7. Now in a brief background, the Supreme Court is hearing a 25-year-old case on trafficking of children by orphanages. Now while hearing this case, the Supreme Court made certain observations. Now let us understand them. Now one of the observations that the Supreme Court made is that the dignity of the child needs to be protected. And the second observation that has been made is that the people found guilty of trafficking should be punished and also should be held liable for violation of human rights. Now trafficking is already considered a crime under Indian laws. Now trafficking is already prohibited in India under Article 23 of the Indian Constitution and is regulated and criminalized under several laws such as the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act of 1956, POSCO Act of 2012 and the Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 and among several other state laws also. Now where the problem lies, as the Supreme Court has observed, is that the violation of human rights needs to be addressed. Now the Supreme Court has said that there is a Human Rights Law 1993 which has provided for setting up of exclusive human rights courts with special public prosecutors. Now these human rights courts had to be set up in every district. But the problem with this is not a single state government has formed these courts. Now observing this, the Supreme Court has issued notices to all states and asked them to respond in 2 weeks. Now hopefully up till here, you have understood what the Supreme Court's observation in this case has been on how the Supreme Court has emphasized on the violation of human rights due to trafficking. You also further understand on how trafficking is regulated and punished as a crime in India. Moreover, you understand that the Human Rights Law 1993 and the Human Rights Code is an effective solution to the problem raised by the Supreme Court. Now, this article is important for your UPSC preparation from the governance section and also from the social issues section. So, if a question is asked in your mains examination that child trafficking is not only a crime but also a violation of human rights, comment, then by using this article, you would be able to answer this. Now, we move on to our next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 13. Now, this article talks about the bank recapitalization program. Now, as you may know, the Government of India had announced a large bank recapitalization program, and this recapitalization package had three parts. The first is that the Government of India would infuse around 18,000 crores from the budget. Moreover, the banks would raise around 58,000 crores from the market in the next 2 years. While the main feature of this recapitalization package was the issuing of recapitalization bonds. Now these recapitalization bonds would be worth around rupees 1.35 lakh crores. And this would be given to public sector banks. Now the first question is as to why there is a need for these recapitalization bonds. Now as you may know, in the last few years, there has been an increase in the non-performing assets or of loans that have gone bad. And because of this rise in non-performing assets, the banks have been unable to offer more credit in the form of loans, etc., and has led to a slowdown in bank lending. Now, the slowdown in bank lending is an important factor because it directly relates to the slowing down of GDP growth rate in India. Now, since credit in the form of loans, etc., mostly goes into investment and building new capacity, it directly leads to an increase in the GDP growth rate. Hence, it is important to enhance the lending capacity of Indian banks. Now, hopefully, up till here, you have understood as to what is the recapitalization package, what is new about this, why recapitalization bonds being issued, and how does it relate to banks and GDP growth rate. Now, the question is, why is it in the news? Now, the Lok Sabha has given its approval for 80,000 crore recapitalization bond out of the total 1.35 lakh crore. Now, this money and the bonds would help in the bailout of the public sector banks. Now, these recapitalization bonds have two problems. First is they would increase the fiscal cost. Now, it means that it would increase the interest burden of the Government of India. So, by issuing around 1.35 lakh crore recapitalization bonds, the interest payment would be of around 8 to 9,000 crores. Now, the second problem with these recapitalization bonds is of accounting costs. Now, by issuing this recapitalization bond, it would increase the debt of the Government of India. Now, under India's laws, these bonds would add to the deficit because it increases the government's liability. Now, hopefully, up till here, you've understood as to why these recapitalization bonds are in the news and what are the two problems with regards to them. So, if a question is asked in your mains examination, in the economic development section, you would be able to answer. Now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's paper. Let's move on to the question for today.